Welcome to Celebrity Interviews with Paul. I am so privileged today. I have with me Jakob Guanzon. He is the author of Abundance, a critically acclaimed novel. You can hear a subpar interview on NPR with him, not nearly the quality you'll be getting in a few minutes. It is a powerful book. It is an important book. It puts a face on poverty in this country and helps you see what's going on in people's lives. If you care deeply about people in poverty and you think systems oppress them, you'll learn also why sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And if you think if people just tried harder, they would be good, you'll learn why systems work to keep people at bay. So welcome, Jakob.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, my privilege. How is life in the 75th year of the pandemic?
Yeah, it certainly feels like it's been that long, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh boy. It's, now that we're kind of coming out of it and been able to reflect on it a little bit retrospectively at this point, a lot of my family's been safe and I'm really grateful for that. And it's been a real chance to reflect and kind of disconnect and focus on the relationships that really matter, because there's been that much more time to be kind of away from the office, away from the grind. I'm here in New York, and so really withdrawing from the hustle and bustle of daily life has really settled things down for me and given me a chance to focus on writing and other creative projects as well as relationships. And despite the tragedy and real loss that we're still going to be recovering from for a long time, I'm really just grateful that for the chance it's given to reflect on a lot of things. It's been a real check for me. So yeah.
Good. No, it's nice to hear that we can all find some kind of good thing in the midst of this. And personally, yeah, I'm thrilled to hear that you're writing. So that's good, because I'm looking forward to the next book too. So the book Abundance is a novel. It tells the story of Henry, a young man with his son Junior, and we begin at a McDonald's, and Junior's celebrating his 8th birthday. And Henry knows exactly how much money to the penny he has at all times, and he makes sure that his son gets to supersize his Big Mac meal on his birthday.
Yeah.
What were you hoping to accomplish through this novel?
Yeah, I started working on this novel right towards the end of grad school, and I went to. That's what brought me to New York initially, was to do an MFA here at just a couple blocks north of Columbia University. That's where I studied, and after that experience, I was thinking a lot about class and privilege, because I'm originally from Minnesota, and I didn't grow up a lot alongside a lot of the people that I was attending classes with and who were giving those classes. And it was a real kind of shock to the system that I wasn't necessarily able to process when I was in the midst of it. So as grad school started winding down, and I was thinking really about the kind of trajectory my own life has had and the opportunities that I'd had, that a lot of the guys I worked with I worked landscaping and flipping houses and real blue collar kind of stuff to get by, and seeing the kind of trajectory that my own life had taken, I really wanted to reflect on what life is like for, I think, a lot more Americans than people in my own situation. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I really wanted to dig into and reconnect with friends who were not having the same kinds of opportunities and privileges I was, and mining their stories for what the kind of underbelly of the States can look like and feel like. And so that's what I wanted to focus on in my first novel, because this is my first novel. I always write short fiction, and I have a lot of fun with that too. But yeah.
It is, I mean, part of what it seems like you've done is you've taken statistics and numbers, and clearly there's depth and research behind behind the book, but you've given it a face and a character and a person in Henry. And he has a son, Junior. Why does he have a child? Why was that important?
That was actually a very strategic kind of decision that didn't go into the initial conception of the novel. The initial conception of the novel itself was the structural premise of organizing the entire thing by the $cent amount that Henry has in his front pocket, right?
Because every chapter title is a dollar amount.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's like 0 or 38 cents, and there's that one where it's 50,000, and we can't wait till we find out what that's all about.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And so I had that idea from the start. I wanted to I knew that'd be an interesting kind of premise to work within. But as I went through and, committed to dealing with a character who was experiencing homelessness, it seemed really important to involve a child in this story because of the way that we commonly discuss poverty in our culture, and it's really common for us to deflect to the notion that if somebody's experiencing poverty or joblessness, that this is their fault, and at times it can be. I'm not trying to. I don't want to make any blanket statements. People, and Henry makes terrible decisions too, and but there's also a lot of systematic forces at play that do perpetuate situations of poverty or homelessness, etc. And so putting a child at the forefront of this story, the child is blameless. We can be mad at how our fellow citizens might be behaving or spending their welfare or whatever, these things that I might find I personally find a little problematic in terms of casting that sort of judgment on our brothers and sisters. But a child is always going to be blameless, and really complicates the reading, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and part of it too, though, I think, like you talk about, like, we pass judgment on, in the culture, we pass judgment on people and how they spend their money, and particularly people that we perceive as poor. And I think, like, if I had to make every financial decision exactly right every single time, I make a lot of dumb financial decisions. I just have enough affluence that I can overcome them. Yeah. And they're not that dumb. They're not tens of thousands of dollars worth of dumb, and I can recover from them. But that's a reality, and that's true for most people. And I think too, like, I realized, one of the statistics I realized that kind of told me how I live in a different world than a lot of people was, and I think this number has changed some, but one of the previous censuses, adults over 25, only 25% had a college degree. Yeah. In the United States. And I thought, like, I don't have that many people I associate with that don't have college degrees. Like, my percentage would be more like 90-10 have college degrees, or 70, if it's 75-25, it's 75 have college degrees, which just kind of, and that's not the only marker, but it told me that I live in a different world than the vast majority of people. And I've had different privileges and opportunities. So obviously the novel, the title Abundance, is partly that's kind of a reminder of what's all around. But I also saw, like, in the midst of Henry, who does have a felony conviction, and we find out why he's got a felony conviction and some of the poor choices he made around that. But at the same time, there's this scene where he and this old Mexican man are being hired as day laborers. And he has almost no gas in his truck, which is the other thing. Like, you could have almost done the novel by how much gas is in his tank too, or how many miles he has left to drive, because he's constantly looking at that too. But the guy gives him like $20 to get gas in his truck. Yeah. And Henry splits that 20 with the old Mexican man, that he doesn't have to. Yeah. And he literally doesn't have any money to put in his truck. You put gas in his truck. Yeah, I think I'm so glad that you brought up that detail, because that writing that scene, in the moment of writing it, I'm actually getting goosebumps myself, because it was one of those
like just really quick moments that reminded me of the kind of generosity that, like, self-defeating generosity that I
Mhm.
found among my poor and working class friends back in Minnesota. And
Mhm.
I mean, reckless kind of generosity that they didn't even think about. And I mean, and you kind of also see this in the Red Lobster scene as well, where it's
Yeah.
just where they got payday. I mean,
Right.
payday was, you know, they're taking care of everybody at the bar, you know,
Right.
they're
Right.
and it's like, man, we all got bills to pay, you know,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah.
in that moment it's just taken care of. And so I thought that was, and I think the line in that one is, you know, Henry could tell that $5 weighed just as heavy in this man's wallet as it did in his own, something like
Hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
they're both in that situation where $5 is substantial, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Just so that, it was beautiful to see kind of that side of his humanity too, as a and he becomes this, it lifts him up, and
yeah.
and yet at the same time, then we see the systems where his mother has cancer, because we go back and forth because we're finding out how did Henry become homeless and live in his truck,
Yeah.
and his mother has cancer, she dies, his father did everything he could to keep her alive, and then his father dies, and Henry inherits the debt,
Yeah.
the medical debt, which from his mother who has died.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he has he doesn't want, he pays it. He chooses to pay it even though he didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
He could have done something, but he chooses to cash out and pay it and be done with it. Um, uh, and the idea that, medical debt like that would be like passed on to the seventh generation, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, and then I guess, you know, is there a version of this story where Henry makes it? Is there a version where he comes out on the other end?
Oh boy. I hope so. And I think the way I kind of left this novel, you know, the way it ends here, I didn't want to, it's a bit ambiguous, which I, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, that kind of decision I think is a bit more artful, because I didn't think it'd be fair to the broader circumstances that were being represented in this novel to give it a nice, you know, bow tie kind of ending that very conclusive and clear. But I also wanted to suggest that at least Junior is going to have a chance, because
Okay.
I think that's the most, I mean, when I think about my parents and I think about my friends that are parents right now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their ultimate their biggest goal is always what can they do to improve the lives and chances and etc. of their children, and that's the
Right.
gift. Even if
Yeah.
Henry's personal circumstances are a bit grim with the way the novel ends,
Mm-hmm.
there's a chance still for Junior, and that's the biggest gift, his ultimate priority, you
Well,
know.
clearly throughout the novel, Henry's focus is, in his own kind of at times bumbling way, incompetent, slightly incompetent way, but his
Yeah.
own way, his focus is trying to do everything he can for Junior
Yeah.
and trying to give Junior opportunities and chances,
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep him in the good school that by chance they ended up in, because the trailer park that they lived in just happened to be within the boundaries of a
Yeah.
more affluent society, affluent community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he really, and yet at the same time, his felony conviction holds him back. Um, his own stuff holds him back.
Yeah.
His own baggage, and of course the fact that that his girlfriend Michelle, the mother, abandons them
Yeah.
and leaves them to their own devices. So he doesn't even have kind of a partner in the whole thing who's supportive.
Yeah. It,
So
it's a tough life, and you know, and
yeah,
sadly, it's not that uncommon of a situation, right?
right, right.
So yeah,
So is there where's their hope? Where's their hope in the novel?
that is a great question. You know, there's hope. I think there's hope in the goodness of others when you
Hmm.
are when you do like the scene with Jorge, the
Hmm.
Mexican fella.
Yeah.
These there's these fleeting bits of mirth, and I was really mindful about the interactions that Henry had with like cashiers
Hmm.
and clerks, and
Hmm.
because those are something when you are spending, when you're when I was working in that kind of field and always driving around. I mean, you just
Yeah.
live in your truck essentially, except nighttime when you're doing that kind of stuff. And those are the only interactions you get to have with like people beyond your crew, your work
Sure.
crew, right? And so, um, and and those kinds of mercies that we're able to give to
Hmm.
strangers, complete that we're just having
Yeah.
these really transactional exchanges with, essentially there are opportunities to connect with people on a very human level. And I think, we by and large we just are kind of rushing through life to get to what we all want individually, and there's nothing wrong with that, but to be mindful of those kinds of opportunities. And I need to do a lot of work on this myself. I'm not,
Oh, take a number.
yeah.
Get
So
behind me, because we all do.
yeah,
We all take cashiers, clerks, wait staff, everybody. We take all those people for granted when we
absolutely.
roll through our days. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I've also thought, like, when traveling alone through airports or things like that, I've thought, um, you could be surrounded by people, and the only people who really talk to you are the people who are paid to talk to you,
Hmm. That's right.
which is a different kind of loneliness. You know,
Oh my
um,
God. Yeah.
because you're in an airport, there's thousands of people all around you, and the only people that talk to you are the flight attendants who have to, or
Hmm.
the people checking you in, or the person at the newsstand,
Yeah.
where you buy the $7 pack of gum, which
Hmm.
is a poor financial decision all the way around. But we've all made it, so
Hmm.
that's the way it goes. Um, well, I think this. I love the way you've put kind of um, a picture to this, and given us something to think about, and given us a sense of empathy towards that reality. And yet you didn't do it in such a way that that it you don't deify, you don't sanctify Henry. He isn't beatified. He's
Yeah.
got he certainly has his limitations. But I think this is an important book for people to read, and I don't think there's enough out there like that. So I thank you. I thank you for writing it. I thank you for the gift that you have given to this world, and I encourage people to read it and buy it. And there will be a link in the description below where you can find it on Grey Wolf Press, and you can follow Jakob on his Instagram, and we'll have other sources like that. I always ask people one last question, and that is, where do you find joy?
Hmm. There's a lot of joy in my life, and so I think it's my closest relationships. My mother was just here and visiting for New York, and I hadn't seen her and I've been with her for Mother's Day in over a decade,
Hmm.
and to give her a hug and tell her how much she means to me and how happy I am that our relationship has stayed solid as adulthood. I think that's a huge one. So my family, my partner, and my friends, I just, when it's not art, when I'm not alone toiling away and finding joy on the page and the
Yeah.
pen and the scribbles, then
Hmm.
that's it for me. That's really it for me, and that's great.
Well, thank you for the gift of your time, and blessings to you. And I'm looking forward to the next book.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's a real pleasure.